G'day listeners. On this episode of Captain and the Clown, we discuss expectations. Not just expectations that we acknowledge and we have at the front of our mind, but the expectations that lie under the silly stories we tell ourselves. Hope you get something out of this. Enjoy.
Why did it count backwards? I know that we're now recording.
What? Hello, Captain.
What do I...
Come fly with me. Let's fly away.
What are we going to talk about?
I don't know. So, leadership, life, and everything else.
Yeah.
And we're live in Darwin.
We're in Darwin. We're not live.
Well, I'm alive.
True.
We love it up here, don't we?
I know. It's become a regular destination.
So we've got some beautiful clients up here. Yesterday doing some project management training for a large construction company.
Yes.
So that was fun. And I expect this episode to go very well, Michelle.
Your expectations are high.
I have high expectations. We're going to talk about expectations because I had an experience. Was it last week, the big keynote I did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Last week.
Now, I'll preface this by saying when I came off stage and went outside and we were packing up to go up, we had a lovely gentleman come up and say, "Oh, that was the best keynote I've ever heard, blah, blah, blah. I've been to lots of these things." But I was in a bit of a grump.
A funk.
A funk, yes, because I'll say that I think I did a pretty good job up there and we got a lot of fantastic feedback from people, but I'd set very, very big expectations on myself because I was trying some new material and it was a very big audience. And so, yeah, I didn't realize at the time that I'd built all my expectations up. And it's something that that we even teach not to do. And so I failed my own lessons.
Well, to me, it just made you seem more human because I still have a tendency to put my expectations high, especially if I'm doing speaking, and then fall short, even though it's good, very
then you're
good.
Brilliant at what you do.
And the feedback from the audience is always lovely and inspiring and uplifting. However, when your own expectation isn't met, which sometimes, and I admit, is not achievable, but I have this expectation.
Yeah.
And for you to admit last week that it happened to you, it selfishly made me feel like I was not doing so badly.
Well, thank you.
But it happens, and I would imagine, not being there myself, but elite sports people like you were, that expectation that you put on yourself and then not being able to live up to it would produce a funk, even though the results were amazing, outstanding, you won, etc.
Yeah, expectations are an interesting thing. So we did a podcast recently about getting into the zone or flow, etc., and using inner monologue, outer monologue. But I want to talk more about this because in our anti-fragility and stress management course, we talk about you can't be stressed without an expectation.
Yeah.
Expectations are the foundation of stress. So the quick example I always use, I moved to Sydney from the country. The thing that annoyed me the most was traffic.
Yeah.
So I'd get in a car and I'd drive erratically like everyone else and, impatiently, and I'd get stressed. But then I realised that if I tell myself that Sydney traffic's a nightmare, I'm always going to be stressed. And so instead, I just changed it to Sydney traffic is an opportunity to do something I enjoy. I love learning, so I'll listen to my favourite podcasts, audiobooks, stand-up comedians, and now I love traffic because I get the opportunity to learn and laugh. But when you analyse where that stress is coming from, when I think Sydney traffic is a nightmare, what sits underneath that is an expectation that I should be able to get in my car and go wherever I want with no traffic, Michelle, because I want to own the road. And
you are the god.
I am the god of traffic.
Yes, the traffic part.
The traffic passes. It's like the water's part. And so when you analyse all your stress, what sits underneath it is an expectation that's not being met.
Yeah, like when, getting the kids ready for school.
Yeah.
If they're not doing how you want them to, your expectation is that they will bow and do whatever you want without any pushback and, do it how you would do it.
Yeah.
Without you necessarily conveying it, but the expectation's there. And of course, it doesn't happen like that.
No. And so, like, going back to what you were saying about elite sport and the flow that we were talking about the other day, I remember after we spoke about this that there was one particular tournament. We were in Sicily and playing against the Italians, who were the world champions. They were just the best, and I had an expectation that I was going to play well. And I remember sitting there in the pool. They were scoring at will.
Yeah.
I was playing shit. I was playing horribly, and I was beating myself up in my head about, how could you play this badly? And then the coach even said the reason why we're doing the defence that we're doing is because you can't save a shot, and that made things worse for me. And I was
so much encouragement there.
I don't blame him. I was playing shit. I was meant to be, an elite athlete.
The world number one.
And I was not yet. Okay. I think it was before then. But I was playing horribly. And I remember trying to get out of my head. I couldn't get out of my head, and it was a really awful experience. But what was going on is my expectations of being able to perform, rather than focusing on my systems and my training and what I'm there to do. So in other words, connecting with the moment.
Yep.
Yeah. And so
the play as was actually happening.
Exactly.
Yep.
So almost like get out of your head. I was so in my head. So expectations not being met is where the majority of our stress comes from. Yeah, and I'd really built up that keynote, I think also primarily because we were videoing it for my new speaker reel, and I'd set up all of these expectations in my head about how I was going to be on stage, and then it was this massive room with 500 people in the room, and they were sitting as far away from me as possible. It was one of those conferences where nobody wants to sit at the front. So I typically like engaging with the audience, and I couldn't get that engagement because they were so far away. But then you told me later that the people down the back were really engaging, but I couldn't hear them and I couldn't see them. And so even though I'll say I think I delivered a great keynote because of the feedback, it wasn't where my expectations were. And as a result, I had a real funk that day.
We experience something similar when doing simulator training and simulator testing. Mm-hmm. So there's a real thing that happens, which is when you don't necessarily, you muck something up in the simulator check. And there is a tendency to ruminate on that. Meanwhile, the aircraft simulator is flying at 900 kilometers an hour, and you're missing more things, and then because you're stuck in your head, and the expectation was, and you may have probably armchaired it, looked over the approach plate, known even from hearing other pilots talking about what the sim check was about.
So armchairing is preparing mentally.
Yeah, it's and we've spoken about this before, where athletes do it, pilots do it,
mental
doctors
rehearsal.
do it. Yeah, mental rehearsal in the armchair or not in the actual aircraft. Although you have also said in a previous podcast that anytime you missed a shot when you were goalkeeper, that rather than
getting the ball out straight away,
putting the ball out, you would mentally rehearse what it looked like that goal, that you saved the goal rather than it went past you.
Rewired it as a lesson and a future success. Yeah,
so we were told, and Czech captains would know this and would see it, and the good ones would stop the simulator, especially on new pilots, and to the company and say, hey, this is what we've noticed, that and it's a thing that happens. It's not just you're normal.
Yep.
And this is an opportunity now to point it out and to help you get over it, where you've got to let it go.
Yep.
And you've got to continue. Otherwise, you're stuck back there and things are happening and you get into all sorts of mess because you're not in the moment.
Yes.
And so that expectation of it will go well and you should do it a certain way, if it doesn't happen on the day or that time, rather than beating yourself up because of that expectation, you've got to let it go.
Yeah, because you've got to react in the moment to what's happening in the moment. You've got to connect to the present moment.
Yes.
And when you're in your head, like you said, you're not connecting, and so therefore you're just going to perform worse and worse and worse.
I remember one particular sim session, and I was a first officer, and the captain very good captain, good pilot, still is, and just he set himself up. Now, the background was he had some stuff happening at home, and so he wasn't 100% in the game, so to speak. But a lot of notes had gone around about that particular sim check. So we knew there was an expectation of what was going to happen. We were given the notes from the company about you will be required to perform these manoeuvres throughout the line operating exercise, the LOE, but how it was going to be done was meant to be a bit of a, in the moment. However, everyone knew how it was going to be done. Turning inbound, the left engine will fail, or you'll get this warning, and then the expectation from the check captain is that you will do this, this, and this. So it's not really a surprise. The captain I was flying with had read all of the notes from the other pilots. So his expectations were locked in. He was rigid on what was going to happen. Now, because so everything was going well as per the cheat sheets, and then he wears glasses with his headset, and he had to put on an oxygen mask, was one of the failures that we were expecting. However, what happened was, because his glasses got in the way and he hadn't practiced that, and it took longer than what he anticipated and what the cheat notes had said, because other people, it had taken a certain amount of time, which meant you were so many nautical miles from the approach and all this. We were then not in the same position that everyone else had been in. So rather than adjusting his expectation based on now we're not where we were meant to be as per the notes, he followed the notes as in his mind. So the picture out the front window was not what it should be, because we were not in the position we should have been to commence. And he just got fixated on this, no, this is how it's meant to be, the expectation, rather than what was actually happening. And it was the only simulator exercise, and thankfully I never had to do it in flight, where I had to say the words, "Captain, you must listen," which is basically you have to take over. The captain's no longer in control, because they're not listening, they're not seeing what's happening. And you don't want to do that in a simulator exercise, especially a check, because it could mean that captain fails. Yeah. And you look after your mates and your colleagues. You want them to succeed. That's right. And it's two crew, you're in it together. Yeah. And so it was really, really hard. He was saying no, and we basically had one engine on reduced power, which we were set up for a perfect 3-degree slope in on one runway, but the notes had said that we were on the opposite runway. So he was trying to do that, which we wouldn't have made it. Okay. And he just kept on saying, no, set up for this. And it's like, well, we're perfectly on profile and, it's straight ahead. And no. And then we...
So not only did he have expectations, he was being quite stubborn as well.
Well, that's right, because he was still thinking about... he was thinking about what was coming next as per the notes, but also the stuff up that had occurred because of the oxygen mask. He was still in his head about that. So he wasn't able to see what was really happening. Yeah,
because his expectations, the notes that he had, took him away from reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what happens when you have very strong expectations. Filters start to appear in your mind where you're seeing the world through these filters. Yeah. And we were talking about this morning. So if you have certain expectations, let's say you have an expectation that your partner does this or your colleague should do that. And so that expectation is entrenched in your mind. And so what happens is when they don't do what you're expecting, your brain goes, look, they're not doing it. And then you start to get into this mindset, he or she always does this or always doesn't do that.
Or this always happens to me.
This always happens to me, yeah. Or you never. Yeah. And so we start to catastrophize and label it as happening all the time or never happening ever. And so then in your partnership or your job or your relationship with your kids or whoever it is, you've now got this filter where you're looking for it to never happen or to always happen. And then you then ignore the evidence that's counter to that. So if your statement is, you never do this, you will never see it when they do it. Yeah. Because that won't justify and validate your perspective, your paradigm. And so then you have that argument with them, oh, you never do this. And then they try and point out a time that they did do it and you don't remember that because your brain didn't allow you to actually take that information in. So you will actively start to ignore evidence to the contrary. And so expectations are really actually quite dangerous things, aren't they?
They are. The good thing that happened out of that Simex was that he was a good checkie and could see that there was an opportunity for a lesson. Now, guaranteed, that captain and I have always been able to recognise when we have that expectation bias almost, and since then,
awesome.
Because it was a great lesson. Now, he didn't fail, we didn't fail, and he was able to stop and point out exactly when it happened, and as a mentor rather than coaching, say, get us to self assess. And it was really, really powerful and really helpful. Now, again, we had a great checkie, we had the time in the simulator, and that we were both open to this feedback. And it did it. So that was day one, and then the next day, we went on and passed.
And that's one of the things that I love about pilots from what you've told me is that you're all open to learning. You're all open to owning your mistakes. And when you make a mistake, you own it, you learn from it, and then you don't repeat it.
That's it, yeah.
Whereas in other industries, they actively hide mistakes.
Well,
For example, in the medical industry.
Yeah, they used to.
And they used to because they're encouraged by the insurance companies to hide their mistakes lest they be sued.
Well, money, that's right.
It's all money. But yeah, hopefully that industry is starting to learn or change and act more like the aviation industry where there's no fault. It's more every opportunity to learn is taken. So if there's a mistake made or whatever, you act as an industry, you've told me, you actively look for the lessons in it to share that lessons with everyone else.
Yeah, there's no fault.
Yeah.
So, and they look at the systemic issues rather than that person individually.
Yeah. So procedural issues and system issues.
Yeah. And because potentially if it happens once, it will happen again and has happened previously. Yeah. So, and there's a great book, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before, Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed, and I was recommended that book by a fellow pilot, Rich. G'day, Rich. And it's a great book. Matthew gives great stories from aviation, and he compares it to the medical world, and he says, and he quotes, and we've also said it in aviation, amongst other pilots, that pilots can't hide their accidents, especially where lives are lost, and it can be hundreds of lives lost because of one accident, whereas doctors kill people one at a time, which is a morbid way of looking at it. But reading through this book, I actually got quite angry at some of the stories, whether they were true or not, about how doctors had covered up mistakes. Yeah, well, medical mistakes happen one person at a time. That's right, but how they'd covered them up, saying that the patient had an underlying problem or they already had this. I really recommend this book. Black Box Thinking. Black Box Thinking. It's an amazing book. It's great. So coming back to expectations, the expectations that we have really determine our experience in life. Yes. Yeah. So if you look at anything that causes you stress, what sits under that stress is an expectation that's not being met. And I'll use an example I love talking about in the customer experience workshops that we run. I'm a nerd. I've got a background in IT. I started before Windows, so I think DOS and WordPerfect for DOS, so that's how old I am. Before the mouse, Michelle. Oh, okay. I didn't know there was no mouse ever. Yeah. We had orange writing on a computer monitor with a keyboard attached with one of those. Remember those old telephones that had the curly cord? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So imagine one of the curly cords attached into a monitor and orange writing on the screen. That's how old I am. Wow. Yes. Anyway, so then Windows came out and we rolled out Windows, Microsoft Office, and I'm sure everyone listening would have had this experience. You call the help desk and they go, "Have you turned it off, then back on?"
And I remember when I was working on the help desk and we rolled out Windows, and you quickly learned that if there was ever a fault, you just turn the computer off and then back on, and the fault goes away.
Yeah.
Everything resets. And so I started to get a little bit stressed on the help desk because people would ring up and I'd go, have you turned it off, then back on? You can hear it in my voice, can't you? The Greek guy parachuting.
Yes.
Condescending. And it's the worst joke ever, but I love it. I love it. You know me with bad jokes. Anyway, and then one day I was sitting there and I was kind of studying psychology at the same time, and I realised, hold on a second, I have an expectation that my customers should know that to fix most computer problems, with Windows especially, is you turn it off and then back on. And then the problem's fixed. And so because I had that underlying expectation, people would ring me on the help desk. I'd go, help desk, guy speaking. And they go, yeah, look, I've got this problem with my computer and blah, blah, blah. And I'd go, well, have you turned it off and back on? And they go, of course I have. Do you think I'm an idiot? I said, well, settle, mate. I'm just trying to help you. And it wasn't a very good experience for the customers. But then I realised I've got to remove the expectation that my customers know what I know, because if my customers knew what I knew,
you didn't have a job.
I wouldn't have a job. They wouldn't be calling me. And I remember a beautiful phone call the following week. This guy rang me up, and we used to get this a lot in IT. They'd ring up and they go, oh, hi, guy. I'm really stupid. I don't know how to get the computer to do this thing. And I remember instinctively, because of that new mindset that I developed the week before, I said, mate, you're not stupid. You've just never learnt it. Today's the day you're going to learn it, and I'm going to be the person teaching it to you. And he went, oh, thanks, guy. I said, that's right, mate. I had to learn it at some stage. Today's your day. And then my experience on that phone call changed dramatically. His experience on the phone call changed dramatically. And I realised that what was sitting underneath my, I guess, condescending manner towards my customers early on was the expectation that they knew what I knew. Yeah, and that happens in so many situations. I was talking to another student, and he had a similar one. So he worked in a local council, and he worked doing what's called GIS mapping. So it's basically, mapping like Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, right? And so in the council area, they're always doing different maps and modifying the maps based on any workers. Anyway, I don't know it too well. But he said, yeah, I had a similar experience. I said, can you tell me about it? He said, well, yeah, I was sitting at my desk and one of my colleagues came up and asked me to do some work about some mapping work. And I said, yeah, no problem. An hour later, he's standing at my desk asking, has it been done? And I got really angry. And I told him, look, mate, seriously, I'll get it to you when I can. And when we were doing the training and we were talking about underlying expectations, he said, yeah, Guy, I've realised that I was expecting him to know how long my work took, and I didn't manage that expectation. So I said, what are you going to do in the future? He said, well, next time somebody comes up to me to request some work, which they do all the time, I'm going to say, yeah, absolutely, I can do that for you. Look, just to let you know, it's going to probably take about this many hours. I'll see if I can do it quicker, but I'll get back to you when it's done. And he said the next time I saw him that all of his stress has gone away because he didn't realise that he wasn't managing other people's expectations, and he had an expectation that his customers knew exactly how long things took.
I've been having this issue with my daughter. She, a teenager who knows everything. I wish I knew as much. All teenagers know
everything, Michelle. Don't you know that? We knew it when we were teenagers. We were so much smarter than our parents. God, look back at those times, and to think that we were the most brilliant and they were the most stupid. I can't believe. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Well, her expectation is that I will say yes without any information to her requests, like parties and going out and sleepovers and things. And my expectation is that she will provide the information to me when she asks.
So that you feel confident and comfortable and safe to say yes.
That's it. So we're a little far apart on our expectations. Yeah. So I actually sat down with her and went through, I would love to say yes. I try to always say yes or a version of yes to you. However, this is what I require. So, and I said, I know it's annoying to you that I keep asking questions, and I wrote down a list of what I would need to know in order to say yes. So now she has that. She actually put it as a note on her phone. So when she texts me, she texts me the answers already to that. So it's great. It's brilliant.
That is good. That's very, very good. Well, so you managed your expectations. You managed her expectations.
Oh, but it took a while to get to have the conversation. Otherwise, we were both frustrated.
Yeah. Well, that's just natural. Mothers and daughters and fathers and sons and fathers and daughters. And yeah, when they're in their teenage years, is they know more than us, and we knew more than our parents.
Yeah, but we did find out a couple of weeks ago why.
Oh, yes. This is fascinating.
Yeah, I think you should tell it because you tell it better than I do.
Yeah. So the theory goes that when we become teenagers, our instinct is to not listen to our parents anymore, to actually distance ourselves from our parents. And the biological theory is this, that when you become a teenager, you are actually fertile. Your body is getting ready to produce offspring. And so one of the things your body does is it tells you to move away from your parents, move away from your family, move away from that community, because biologically we should be going to a different village to go out and find a mate and have offspring.
Yes.
Having offspring in the same village is not a good thing for the species.
No.
And so the theory goes that when you become a teenager, your biology is telling you to stop listening to your parents, ignore everything that they're saying, move away from them, go to another village, find a mate and reproduce the species. And that's, if true, and it sounds it resonates with me that, every teenager goes through this. We stop listening to our parents. We know better. There's now a biological understanding of, or possible theory as to why that happens. They're being told by their biology, leave where you are now, so distance yourself from.
Yeah, it doesn't make it easier though.
No. Well, but it gives us a reason. It gives us, with understanding comes acceptance.
Yes.
Yeah, because if we're expecting our teenagers to listen to us, but their body is telling them not to, our expectation is wrong.
Which is why then your friend group as parents and who you tend to gather with is very important, because
especially during the teenage years.
Yeah, whilst they're not listening to you, they may be listening to one of your friends who's saying exactly the same thing, but it's not you.
Well, and that's why we actively seek out people in our community, in our beautiful people in our network, our very close friends, and we want the children to be around them because of the influence that they'll have on them.
Yeah.
We're conscious on this, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, because your children don't want to listen to you, but they will listen to somebody else. And I'm still at a point where my beautiful little 11-year-old son wants to listen to me, and I love it. He actually asks me to have chats about what we teach, and I love it because he's just got this thirst to learn from me. At the moment.
Is it 12 that they stop listening?
12, 13, 14. Yeah. And that's where you need to provide them with other adult influences, sources of information, because they will listen to a sports coach, they'll listen to an adult figure who they respect, a cool dad, a cool friend who doesn't have to make them eat their vegetables, and so they're not always frustrated by it. And so I'm hoping I don't experience that, but I'm ready for it. When he doesn't want to listen to me anymore, I'm going to say, hey, look, here's some amazing people. Yeah. If you ever want to talk, I'm always here, but here's some other people that you can talk to.
Expectations. It's acknowledging that expectations are the underlying cause of a lot of disappointment, anxiety, depression, because it's in the future or in the past, not actually living in the present. But how, it's good knowing this. But then actually...
How do you change it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think my theory is that we should become aware of, and I want to say conversant with, we should be talking to our expectations. I know this sounds a bit weird, but get curious with our expectations. So every time you feel stress, just stop and think, what is the expectation that is not being met, that's sitting underneath?
Yeah.
And become friends with them. Become friends with your expectations, because we all have them. We have expectations about how our partners should behave, how our boss should communicate to us, how our customer should engage with us, how children should do that. We should on everything. Yeah, we should on everything. But if you can change your relationship with your expectations and see them just as entities that you've created that are also malleable. that you can change, that you can adjust them. They are not laws. They're not 100% truths. They're not things that you should stand by like a policeman stands by the law or the judge stands by the legislation. You are able to rewrite them. And when you rewrite them and adjust them for your own health, mental health and success, then you're more in control of your life.
Well, getting curious with it, some of the expectations are ridiculous. Like if you actually look at them...
That I'm the traffic god?
That's it, yeah. Or that don't people know who I am as I walk into a room that nobody knows me? You know, it's
we saw that the other day.
That's right. But the actual underlying expectations generally... I am generalizing here, are ridiculous, stupid, like idealization. I can't speak. Ideation. Ideation. There we go. I put too many.
That's all right. We'll throw in syllables just to create our own words.
So
plenty of people do that.
It's ridiculous. And if it was spelt out, you'd be like, no.
Ideation, idolization, ideation. Anyway.
Yeah.
Ideation.
But the expectation.
If we spelled out the expectations,
you'd think, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. If they were written down in black and white in front of you, what your expectations were, because quite often we hide them behind stupid thoughts.
Yes.
So, for example, Sydney traffic is a nightmare. What sits underneath that is I should be able to get in my car and drive wherever I want, whenever I want, and have no other traffic.
Yeah. Yes, there is no traffic.
So Sydney traffic is a nightmare. It looks like a logical statement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks very logical, and everyone could sit around having a glass of wine and agree to that.
Yes.
You could have a conversation with your friends. Oh, isn't Sydney traffic a nightmare?
Parramatta Road.
And your friends,
Victoria
Parramatta Road
yes.
before the M4 was around. Yeah. And so, all your friends would go, yeah, isn't it? All those cars. But you're all deluding yourself, because what sits underneath the statement that Sydney traffic is a nightmare, and it's so much better now, thank you to those tunnels that we've just had built in Sydney. Well done, government, for doing some infrastructure that actually works. But but what sits underneath that expectation, or that statement, Sydney traffic is a nightmare, is the most absurd, ridiculous expectation that you should be able to get in your car whenever you want and drive wherever you want without any other cars.
Yes.
Oh, it is absurd. Just get in your car earlier. Give yourself some contingency, some buffer, allow an extra 20 minutes or half an hour. And in that half an hour, listen to a podcast like Captain and the Clown.
That's right.
And fill your brain full of knowledge and laugh at the idiot, the clown on the other end of the microphone. Because our expectations sit underneath everything, and it creates the experience that we have in life.
Yeah. Sounds easy, hey?
We teach it and yet we catch ourselves.
But we're human.
Here's the beautiful thing, right? Because we teach it, we're aware of it, which makes us able to catch it more often than most people. And that's not bragging. That's, I guess, just admitting reality, that because we are conscious of it.
Well, beating my head against the wall enough times. By teaching it, and it's every single time I teach, it's like, of course, of course.
Yes, because we're human.
Yeah.
But the people who don't teach this, or who haven't learned it yet, learnt it yet, we'll use the UK learnt, because the people who haven't learnt it yet, you can't expect them to understand where their stress is coming from, and who gets taught this stuff at school?
Yeah, no one.
That was a fun podcast.
It was.
I expected it to go well, and it did. Otherwise, I'd be in a funk right now, just like the other day, where all my expectations didn't happen. But still, yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Bose, thank you for the headphones that we got now, but we paid for them. How about some sponsorship? Bollinger, like we've enjoyed a few of you over the years, but Lint, come on, seriously, we're waiting, we're patient.
Our expectation is that people will find us and just give us money and goods.
Yeah, we maybe have to change our expectation and start doing the necessary marketing for the Bollinger to want to sponsor us, Michelle.
That's it.
All right. That was fun.
Bye, Guy.
Bye.
Well, that was fun.
That was fun.
You're such a clown.
The clown.
Lady Captain. There we go.
And who's going to listen to this? Maybe our mums.
Thanks, Mum.